All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Friday the 13th. Hopefully no black cats or walking under ladders or broken glass, or if you've got, four-leaf clover around, I guess use it if you can. But hopefully nothing but good luck for the Texas Longhorns. Tomorrow in 24 hours, they will be taking on the UTSA Roadrunners. Birds up, meep, all the things. I don't know how what the path to victory is. We talked about that last week with Michigan, but what the path of victory for UTSA will be. But we're going to get into all of that today as we will kind of break down the ways to win for Texas. Should be fairly straightforward, and the ways to win for UTSA maybe a little bit tougher of a challenge to come up with reasons. But when there's a will, there's always a way. Again, upsets happen every single week. We're not oblivious to that. It's just going to be a very steep hill to climb for UTSA. I'm Tanner Carlson along with Jake Jimerson. This is All in Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network right here on YouTube, and where all podcasts can be listened to, Spotify, all the things. Look us up. Like, share, and subscribe. And boost those numbers up. Let's get our algorithm up and become the number one podcast in Texas Longhorns media, if you will. So, Jake, let's talk a little bit more about the UTSA Roadrunners. Jeff Traylor spoke to the media. He had some interesting things to say about Texas. And not only was it a little humorous, and, it also had some truth to it.
Yeah. We're talking about paths to victory. And one of the things that stood out to me was he just basically came out and said, anything can happen on any given Saturday, but for us to win this game, they're going to have to help us a lot. And
it's funny, but it's true.
It is the truth. For UTSA to have a chance to win this game, it's going to require Texas to implode.
Yeah.
For UTSA to stay in this game, it's going to require Texas to somewhat implode. And that's no disrespect to UTSA. I think their fans know that they're not in the same spot they were a couple of years ago, where they were, competing in their conference to win the title. They're just not in that spot this year. They're kind of in a rebuilding process. And so Traylor was aware of that. And I think Jeff Traylor's a guy we both respect a lot as a head coach. Yeah. I think highly of him. And I think, quite frankly, I think highly of the UTSA program. I've had a friend that has played in that program. There's someone I've actually gone to a couple of their games when my friend was playing there.
Yep.
And so their program I've kept up with pretty close over the years, and I've always really liked Jeff Traylor since he took over.
I mean, and you can look at guys like Marcus Davenport was drafted in the first round by the Saints. You got Tariq Woolen, who is a Pro Bowl player for the Seattle Seahawks now. And, you get guys that have gone through that program. A Trey Moore that is now transferred to Texas, and he's one of the better pass rushers in the entire country. He will get drafted in the top 2-3 rounds, depending on how this season goes. He still has his opportunity to rise his draft stock a little bit. UTSA has had talent go through there. And they're not shy to even winning some big games or staying in it with some big teams. And so, I mean,
they were in it in Austin 2 years ago. They had the lead, I think, in the third quarter.
Right.
And I know they were up 17-7 early in that game. And that's a game we were both worried about at that time.
Right.
And UTSA showed up. People forget because Texas won that game by
handedly
points, but mainly on the back of Bijan Robinson. But UTSA was up in that game, and it was close all the way up until getting to the end of the third quarter. Mm-hmm. And so they're a program that's made some noise. And I believe they beat Baylor. I know Texas State's beat Baylor, but I believe they beat Baylor too at Baylor.
It's possible. Yeah, I'd have to go back and really look at it.
I'd have to go back. Don't quote me on that. But I believe they have had a power conference victory or two as well. And so they're a proud program. They're going to come in. They're going to give their best shot. But as Jeff Traylor said, it's their path to victory includes Texas making mistakes. It includes Quinn fumbling the ball, throwing interceptions, and doing things that he just hasn't done that much since last year.
And I bring it up. You can rebuke it. Penalties. I mean, if there's holding penalties on a third down conversion and it makes a 3rd and 5, converting that third down, and it brings it back to 3rd and 15, and then you don't convert it, you have to punt, you give them good field position, they get a big play out of it. There are certain things in this game that can easily happen that can throw the rhythm off and just the momentum to where it's never really comfortable for Texas. And sometimes you have those wacky games. Sometimes you just have games that it just doesn't really go your way. Texas needs to avoid anything they can for that not to happen. Even if Texas plays their B game, their C game, but they play fairly cleanly with no turnovers, stupid penalties, things like that, they should still win handedly.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it last episode, but this is a game where I'd like to see Arch play a lot. I'd like to see Trey Owens get some playing time in this game, though I think Sark maybe will just keep Arch in to get Arch reps. But, this is a game where I think all the fans want to see a bunch of Arch Manning, especially it's a night game at DKR. You're going to have the LED lights going, the drone show.
Mhm.
It's going to be not your typical environment in Austin for a UTSA game. It's going to be a little more amped up coming off this Michigan win. And that's the big thing to me is this crowd's going to be
great
amped
point. That's a great point you make.
This crowd's going to be amped up, and that's why I'm just not too worried about Texas coming out and not playing well. They're going to want to put on a show in front of their fans this week.
That's a great point to make, Jake. Like, it is going to be a night game, and they're going to pull out all the stops, and it's not because of who they're playing. It's for who they just beat and the performance nationally, the recognition that this team has received, overwhelming reviews and just compliments from every national media. I mean, Pat McAfee was singing their praises. Josh Pate, someone that we highly respect, he was singing their praises, and just any, Paul Feinbaum just talking how great Texas looks. And it's like these are guys and media members that have kind of been down on Texas when Texas was down, and rightfully so. And so now getting the recognition that this program should probably always have, but hasn't had, and hasn't deserved, quite frankly. But to come out to your home crowd with that type of energy is gonna be a lot of fun.
Also, this is I guess there was 2 night games last year in DKR. One was Wyoming, and that building was rocking, and actually Texas didn't play that well in that game, but I don't think UTSA is to the level that Wyoming team was last year.
Wyoming was a pretty good program.
And then the Texas Tech game, which Texas obviously came out rocking and rolling in that game. But I think fans are excited to have another night game, to have another chance to go out. The LED lights just got installed last year, and it really does make it I can't wait to see a night game in person there.
Yeah, I know.
And
we haven't been since the upgrades have been.
Yeah, I haven't been since the new end zone.
Yeah.
Living a little further away, it's difficult, but
it looks great. It looks great when there's fans in it.
Yeah,
and they've worked on it. I noticed in the Colorado State game there were more fans
in the Alabama game
in that end zone.
Too. Yeah, I know CDC's really been trying to, and for any of you who don't know, CDC, Chris Del Conte, the athletic director for Texas. I'm sure most of you know that, but he has been making a push to, these fans who buy these seats. Part of when they were building it was you're allowed to come onto the field. And so a lot of them choose to be on the field or into the club levels thing where they're inside and get drinks and in the AC. I know they've been trying to encourage fans to be sitting because it just looks so much better. And I know there's a certain amount of years they have to do that. I bet they'll change up the way those tickets are sold down the road.
It'll be interesting to see how he comes up with it, but it is also it's like luxury suites. I mean, that's essentially what you're paying for. Then that's the experience that you should get. It's just field level, and it's a huge section, and it just makes the TV look like there's not any fans there when they're sold out,
even though it's sold out.
Right?
And in a night game, there's be in the stands, folks. If you're sitting there, it's a night game. Let's show out. Let's show what DKR is all about. It's not the same DKR from 10 years ago before Chris Del Conte arrived, where it was quiet. Games were very country club like, almost Dallas Cowboys like, and just not being excitement. I remember when Chris Del Conte first started, I went there. I think it was second year. I went to a game against USC.
Yeah.
And me and my dad who went to that game were shocked, because the stadium was the loudest we had ever heard. And that wasn't even a good Texas team.
And I even remember as a kid, I remember thinking man, we've got Vince Young and Colt McCoy and all these quarterbacks and all these great teams under Mac Brown. And then on the NCAA games, Texas was always 22nd loudest crowd or whatever. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. We have a great home crowd. We've got a great home record. We do all the things right statistically, but really the loudness of it was just because we were a big school and a successful school. And then we kind of saw where Texas was at its lowest point. And you're right, the crowd was dead. There's been points where I went to the Baylor game, and I believe it was Jarrett Stidham was the quarterback there, and Texas lost in Austin. And I was in the student section, and I was probably one of the only ones like actually cheering at a level to where it would be just like regular cheering, not even going crazy. And
Yeah.
it was embarrassing. It was a very low moment. I was like, man, this is what we've gotten to as a program. So yeah, and so it's nice to see the upgrades, the light show, the smoke show. I mean,
The
the
DJ playing the music. They used to run corporate sponsorships when there was a timeout or went to commercial break. Now you have a DJ playing music, keeping the students involved, and the student section's the biggest difference.
Right.
Is the student section is just truly loud in the heart of the entire stadium now, whereas before they weren't really in a good spot. I know from reading that it was really hard uh, for students to get the tickets and actually get into the game. They had some weird process that made it difficult, and college students are lazy. They're just not going to do it.
No.
Now it's much easier. They're packed in before the game. Helps that the football program's doing a lot
Right.
better, of course. But if you haven't been to DKR in a long time and you think, no, it's not that exciting of an environment, I don't want to go out to the game, deal with parking in Austin. Trust me, even though I haven't been to a game in a few years, I know it's only gotten louder. Tyreek Hill was at the Colorado State game.
Yeah.
And he was tweeting out about what an incredible environment.
Michael Parsons was there, met Bevo, got a new friend, and he said the same thing. Like, this is an SEC ready program. Like, I mean, these guys, Michael Parsons played at Penn State, ladies and gentlemen. He knows a thing or two about a good home crowd. And he was very impressed with the home crowd. That was against Colorado State week 1 at noon.
Yeah. And Josh Pate, who was kind of had inside access for the Texas-Michigan game, he has a video out there that is only a 10-second video that I've probably watched for about an hour or two total. And it's a 10-second video. And it's just the Texas team getting ready to come out to the field for warm-ups. And you see Michigan coming out. And then you look at Texas just sitting there with a boombox vibing, playing music, and looking just monstrous, looking bigger than Michigan, which they were bigger than Michigan and faster than Michigan. And it's just a vibe from the team and an aura, if you will, that they have not had. Didn't even last year, they were figuring out how to win and how to be.
They've got it this year.
This year feels like a team that, even though there's been some turnover in some positions, they still have some great leadership, even with the loss of a incredible leader in Jordan Whittington, who also loves hanging out with Bevo. I know. But there's just a vibe with this team that I think we're just going to see a lot more consistency from this year. And I hope they prove us right over these next few weeks in some games that just should not be stressful, especially these next two.
You know what I would like to see is, they have the Penn State white out, the Michigan white out, or yellow out. I'd like to see Texas start integrating some of the big boy SEC crowd vibes,
striped
crowds, maybe not the checkerboard. That's kind of Tennessee's thing. But a striped crowd, something along those lines to kind of up the game a little bit. But man, when you've got Clemson playing Florida State at night and it's at Clemson, you have to tune in. Like, I don't even care about the game. I care about watching the environment and the fans. I want Texas, and we're on our way, trust me, to get to that point to where you're going to tune in and you're going to see Death Valley and Baton Rouge, and they got Alabama coming out on the field on a night game. That crowd is just going to be absurd. That's the crowd that I'm like, yes, Texas is right there on the verge of doing just a few more, big moments, big games. You have to have a Georgia game at night. Like, that's the thing. You have to have those types of games to have those types of moments and environments.
I would say they were to that level against Bama a couple of years ago. I mean, you had Bama players after the game going, that is the craziest environment I've ever played in.
That is true. And yeah.
That's not something that a Bama player just says after any game just to give the crowd credit, trying to, be nice.
Yeah.
They don't say that stuff.
No.
And after that game, and that wasn't even a night game, they're like, that's the craziest crowd I've played in front of. And you could tell on the TV just how loud it was. And I'm sorry, Big 12 fans, it's harder to be like that for Baylor.
Yeah.
especially not Baylor from, back when they were actually winning 10 games for a
Mhm.
stretch. This current Baylor is what Baylor has been for the majority of their program. Texas Tech, they are very down right now.
Yeah.
It's hard. Now, that game last year was crazy.
No, that game was great. Yeah, and the
that's 'cause
environment
it
was
the
great.
last one.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's just harder for crowds to be super amped up for those games, and that's just not going to be a problem this year. Even when a Kentucky rolls in, it's bigger than a current Baylor rolling in,
Sure.
or a Tech on a regular year where it's not the going for eternal scoreboard, coming off a year where you lost a disappointing game on the road to them.
Mhm.
And so I just think
the commissioner of your league actually rooting for them and saying that
that was an incredible moment. Texas playing that on the big screen right back in his face.
So great. Yeah. I thought the run last year in the Big 12 was one of my favorite moments of being a fan. Was not only that Texas Tech game, but also the Big 12 championship victory, and just holding up the trophy, and just the look of defeat
On the booze.
in the booze, and Sark literally having to grab the mic and saying, "Guys, let's get through this."
You and I were booing him.
Yeah.
I drove down to Texas to watch that game
Yeah.
with you, and Tanner and I were booing the commissioner in the living room.
And from the couch, from
the
where we currently are right now, we were just booing him as loud as we possibly could. Yeah, and he deserved it. Jake, there's not a whole lot to talk about in terms of path to victory for Texas. It's really don't mess up. But I think we mentioned it last episode as well. Come out ready to play. Just come out with the same energy that you had against Michigan. Come out with that same energy. Be ready to play. Be prepared, and everything should fall into place for you.
And it does. It helps with recruiting to come out and play fat. Not just because you win big, but you have recruits. Michael Terry, a 5-star athlete, is visiting this weekend for the game. He's going to be at the game. You're going to have multiple other recruits in the game. Keep the crowd rocking the whole game so that they are just come out blown away by the crowd. And if you're going to the game, be loud the whole game. There's recruits in the stands. They love seeing the environment that they're going to play in front of. And so that's how you kind of contribute as a fan, other than NIL now. That kind of
yeah.
If you can't contribute to the NIL fund, contribute by, if you're at the game, being loud as possible the whole time, because those recruits see that, team feeds off of it. And I think this can be a special year in DKR with having some couple big names coming in. Next year it's going to be big too. A&M is going to be coming to Austin.
Right.
That's going to be a crazy environment. I just think this has a chance to be a special first year in the SEC for a program that was essentially exposed a few years ago for not being ready to be in the SEC.
No, you're exactly right, and you make a really good point about the recruiting and guys like guys like Michael Terry coming in and sitting in the crowd and experiencing that and being on the sideline with the team. And I go back to, and I know we keep bringing it up. We're going to keep bringing it up until we play an OU or a Georgia and the season continues to go on. But we've got 2 weeks to go off of, so I'm not going to mention Colorado State, out of the 2 games. But you look at the amount of Texas fans that showed up to that Michigan game, and afterwards singing the eyes of Texas to those Texas fans that filled the big house. If you go back and you go look at just the stills of the yellow out, half of it's orange, 35-40% of it is orange.
Yeah, I would say a third of it was orange for sure.
Yeah.
And it was, I read, and this is from Twitter, so it's kind of hearsay, but from a couple people that I know were at the game that I follow on Twitter from, the Texas Fall Train that happened when they made the playoffs last year. They said they had some season ticket holders sitting behind them in the Michigan stand, and they went down to them and said, this is the most we've ever seen any team show up with it as far as the amount of fans at Michigan State. And they had been season ticket holders for like 40 years.
That's insane. And I have watched videos of the Texas social media team giving the phone to the Texas players while they're singing the eyes of Texas to the crowd. And just how many of the players were just like, will you look at this? Like, they're looking at each other like, are we seeing this correctly? Like, they know the moment that they're in. They know they are recognizing the opportunity that is in front of them right now and how big of a moment it is. They're embracing it, but they're also appreciating the love and support that we're giving them as fans. And like you said, that's our biggest contribution. That's the only contribution we can really give them in the stands is like, hey, we can help this program out by just supporting them and showing up and encouraging them and having the recruiting see that and be like, I want to be a part of this. I want to be a part. How many commits have already flipped from Florida State and are now looking at Texas? We've got one commit. There's another 4-star, 5-star edge player that is top. Texas is his top 2 right now, and from Florida State. So other programs, when they fail, when they don't have that energy from the fans, that's whenever they put those guys on a visit. And I don't care if you're playing UL Monroe. I don't care if you're playing Georgia. You show up the same way as fans, and it shows the recruiting. Yeah, we want to play. We want to play for this right here. This is fun. Like, this is what we want every week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we've actually mentioned this yet, but from that Colorado State game, when Arch entered the game, the crowd got over 130 decibels, which is near a jet engine.
Yeah, I mean,
for a backup QB.
For a backup QB.
I know it's not your regular backup QB, but still.
He's got a certain name that people resonate with. But yes, I know what you're saying. Yeah, I mean,
it shows the level that the noise can reach in DKR and has been starting to reach over the last couple of years. I mean, the game day environment there before the game too is incredible with the Longhorns city limits, I think is what they call it. Mm-hmm. They always bring out a band. It's always packed. The Bevo Boulevard walk-in for the team. Yeah. I just love
ACL will be starting here pretty soon too. That's always a fun week. You get a lot of celebrities and
now you have F1 that comes in. Yeah. There's just Austin has just changed a lot as far as making the environments at the Texas game and just around the city at the time during some of these games is huge. I actually think the F1 week is the same week as Georgia.
Oh, wow. That'll be huge.
It's going to be a wild weekend.
Yeah. If you're not going to one of those 2 events, probably stay away from Austin.
Yeah.
I can only imagine.
I read that hotels were crazy for that week.
Anything else that stands out to you, or any other games around the league, around the country that we didn't really touch on yesterday's episode that you want to hit on now? We've got about 8 more minutes. We've kind of exhausted the topic of UTSA and matchups, and we kind of know going into this thing, we have a relatively good idea.
There's just not much to talk about, like receivers versus corners, line. Texas has the advantage at every single across the board at every single level. I mean, UTSA just got rocked by Texas State. Texas State's good, but Texas State would likely get rocked by Texas.
Yeah.
And not to do the what do you call it?
Your common opponent breakdown, right? Yeah.
But how about we didn't get to this because our episode was running a little late yesterday, but Florida at A&M, or I'm sorry, A&M at Florida.
Yeah.
Which I mentioned to you earlier. A&M has not won a road game since 2021. That coveted number 1 recruit class has never won a road game. And actually, one of the people from that class, Denver Harris, is on UTSA.
Oh, okay.
Mentioning.
Yeah, that's interesting.
He was 5-star corner. He's had a lot of off the field issues. He hasn't really been good on the field either. Not someone I'm worried about for the game, but just an interesting tidbit. He is in this game with UTSA. But I'm very curious to see, because these are 2 teams that desperately want to win this game.
Yeah, it is.
Florida needs this win because Napier's gone if they lose this game.
Yeah.
Maybe not right after the game, but he'll be a dead man walking the rest of the season. Might already.
It may not take the rest of the season. Now, it may not be immediately after the game, but you go into conference play a losing record. You lose that first conference game. Well, this is a conference game, so I forget the SEC starts a little early.
But losing 2 out of your first 3 games at home.
I think you know what I'm saying. Right?
Yeah, losing 2 your first 3 games at home at the Swamp is inexcusable. And I don't get why Napier's talking about using both quarterbacks. They should be using Lagway, the freshman last week who broke the Florida passing record I know it was against Samford, but he's a 5-star quarterback.
Just let him go.
Let him run.
Yeah.
Because
let him go.
You know what you have in Graham Mertz, and it's nothing special.
No.
And I think A&M's 4-point favorites, if I recall correctly, last time I checked the line.
I'm just asking questions here, Jake, and this is just a question. People are murmuring. They're just asking questions is all. Is that all-time great, best recruiting class to ever be signed in a single year by A&M? Is it a bust? People are asking. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying.
I'll say it. It's a bust. I mean,
they haven't won a road game.
They haven't won a road game. They've lost not the majority of that class, but they've lost a lot of key players from that class. To Walter Nolan's a big one that went to Ole Miss. Denver Harris had a lot of issues. He was the one who was speeding through the parking garage. And obviously that was not under Elko. That was under Jimbo.
No, that was the Jimbo regime.
I do think Elko is a better football coach than Jimbo, especially in the current state. But
I'll be interested to see if when Elko gets his guys. I said this with Texas. I said this with Strong. I said this with Herman. You give them 3 years. You have to have the majority of the team be their guys. 3 full seasons, and it has to be 3 recruiting classes that they come in. And so, really, by year 4, if it's the same old, you got to cut ties with them.
Especially for a program like even though A&M's not been, they have the resources to act like a top tier program.
They do, and they also have. Well, you also have the transfer portal and NIL that. There has been no time better now than to quickly rebuild something. You can rebuild something quicker now than you ever have been able to in the past.
Yeah, I mean, look at what Sarkisian did at Texas. 5 wins, 8 wins, 12 wins.
Right.
That is a very clear progression. We'll see what they end up this year. Obviously, as far as regular season goes, it's the only way to improve off last year, regular season-wise, is to go undefeated. That is going to be a tall task with having Georgia on the schedule, OU, A&M.
You can exceed that with the playoffs.
Playoffs, exactly. Yeah. That's where Texas's season hopefully is ultimately decided as how they do in the playoffs. I think playoffs is an expectation at this point, especially with 12 teams. But I'm curious to kind of predict this Florida A&M game. I've bounced back and forth, and I'm going to go back to week 1. After week 1 happened, I said, I will never trust A&M in a big game again. It's a big game, but it is a big game for these two programs. Prove me wrong, A&M.
Wow, let's do it.
I am picking Florida to win this game at home. It's probably going to be an ugly game, but at this point, I picked a team that I hate in week 1, and they made me look stupid.
Yeah.
So if you're going to make me look stupid, at least do it by actually doing something on the field, because I picked you to win against a team that lost to Northern Illinois in their only other game. So I'm not picking them to win this game. I'm taking Florida to win by 2 touchdowns.
In the famous words of George Bush, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, ain't gonna fool me again. So yeah, I'm with you. You can't double down on A&M. That would make you look really, really bad. You know what? I'll go ahead and that's tough. It's at the Swamp. And it seems like they've got maybe a little life in that crowd from the freshman. When he takes the field, it seems like there's some juice. They're
going to be juiced up for an A&M game.
And I just think that as ugly as it might be, I've seen nothing from A&M that should suggest they barely lost to a Notre Dame team who just lost at home to Northern Illinois.
Yeah, that was at A&M.
That loss seems so much worse in week 3 than it did going into week 2.
And if you watch that game, I thought the defenses played pretty good, but you saw a lot of deficiencies on both teams. And you had mentioned that as well after the game. I tried to give a little more credit to each team. I regret doing that. But you look at the McNeese State game, A&M dominated that game, but you have Connor Wakeman, who I thought highly of before the season, and he is coming off a major injury, but he's throwing 14 passes against McNeese State. And I know he didn't play the second half, and he did have a good stat. I think he had 125 yards passing and 2 or 3 touchdowns, but he has not looked like the quarterback that he looked like early last year.
Would you not want that to your quarterback after looking a little rough to get a little bit more reps, though?
It was horrible against Notre Dame. Not even a little rough. It was
But awful. You would want some more reps. Some live game reps.
Unless
regardless of what the score is, all that. reps at that point matter. And we mentioned it with Arch. Like, I think Sark is going to keep Arch in and not bring in Trey Owens simply for the fact of he wants Arch to get as many reps under his belt before next season as he can possibly afford to.
Yeah, because Arch is the obvious starter next year. And unless it is now an open competition between Wigman and I think it's Marcel Reed, I might not be getting that right,
Don't
but
ask me.
I'm a little bit too much of a college football junkie keeping up with all the teams.
Yeah.
But unless it's an open competition, I think that was kind of a foolish move on A&M's part to take Wigman out in the second half of that game, because 14 passes against McNeese State when he just went, what was it, like 16 of 30, 19 of 30 or something like that against Notre Dame, and threw some bad interceptions and kind of looked like Quinn a couple years ago with as far as his footwork, which is not something he had showed in the past. He looked very squeamish behind an offensive line that is probably the overall weakness for that A&M team. And so until A&M proves otherwise, and especially until they win an actual road game, I'm not going to pick them to win. And so I like Florida.
Yeah, I'll take Florida as well. All right, final predictions. Texas, UTSA, go.
Give me Texas 62-10.
Wow. I was going to go around that 62 range. I'll say, just to up the game, I'll say 65-7 Texas. And it should. I mean, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I just think it's going to get ugly, and it's going to get ugly fast.
I could see them end up scoring in the 50s because they just kind of
let the foot off.
Take the foot off in the second half and just kind of cruise. But I think even if they cruise, they might be able to get up to that. But I'd say 50 points is absolutely an expectation going into this game. This should be similar to Colorado State. And I wouldn't mind seeing another shutout personally.
I could probably see another shutout, but who knows what will happen. We'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Next time you'll see us, it'll be on Saturday following the UTSA game right here on All In Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. Hook 'em.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.